Thank you, Jasper, for the introduction to the brand session here today. And as we sort of kick off, and as Jasper sort of mentioned, I think for me that the brands piece is almost the fifth tenet to the conversation that we've just sort of had, because commercial partners are hugely important to the way rights holders kind of survive, but equally further the conversations with the consumers and the fans. And each of the brands here have a very different strategic rationale as to why they're in cricket. And we're going to talk to them a little bit about their journeys that they've been on, and what the future also holds for each of the brands in cricket as well. So I'm going to start with sort of Ashwani from sort of DP World, and I'd love to hear about sort of the business rationale as to sort of why you sort of got involved in cricket in the first place.
Thank you, Joanne. Is it on? Can you hear me? Great. So cricket's global reach and DP World's global presence completely align in reaching out to communities worldwide. In sports, we see a relentless pursuit by teams and associations, both on the pitch and field, towards innovation. And similarly, DP World is innovating continuously to enable global trade for our customers. And it is this shared vision which prompted us to create multiple partnerships in sports, and specifically to cricket. Earlier this year, we signed a global logistics partnership with ICC. Beyond that, we have the naming rights for the DP World Wanderers Stadium in South Africa, and in the UAE, the DP World ILT20, we are the title partners. So there's a lot going on for us. Yeah.
And from a little bit more of a pointy end, from a brand perspective, what are the sort of the dials and metrics that you're actually trying to shift through the partnerships in cricket itself?
So for us, everything is about going beyond boundaries and nurturing grassroots talent. Yeah, so all the focus that we take through cricket is centered around this global reach.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. I'll move the question on to sort of Kaveri. In a similar vein, Mastercard has had a sort of a history with cricket, both through sort of talent and sort of different sort of properties. Can you sort of share a little bit more about kind of the strategic rationale as to why sort of Mastercard is in cricket, and specifically for sort of the India market and the importance for the brand here?
Sure, thanks, Joe. So if I think about, well, firstly, so Mastercard is a B2B2C business, a B2B2C organization. So when we talk about growing the brand, driving the business, creating competitive advantage, it's not only for Mastercard, but it is equally for our partners. And our B2B partners are banks and merchants primarily. There are more, but for the sake of this conversation, we will stick to these two categories. And when we go to banks, for instance, and we say, give us your affluent or your millennial portfolio, they turn around and say to us, what are you giving us? What are the tools, technologies, assets that you're bringing to us? And that is where sponsorships play a critical role. It's also what makes marketing really fun at Mastercard. Otherwise, you're talking about an ingredient brand. So this is not your conventional B2C model. And our sponsorships are underpinned by 10 passion points that we've identified. So sport, e-sport, within that gaming being huge, culinary, travel, lifestyle, art, music, etc. Sport is by far the biggest. So just for numbers' sake, we spend about $250 million on sponsorships across the world. And sport is, like I said, a very large part of it. And the reason for that, and the conversation on the prior panel spoke extensively to the scale and intensity of engagement that cricket engenders. And therefore, it gives us a very fertile ground. All sports around the world give us a very fertile ground for creating and curating experiences and assets that we can give to our partners. We can give to that bank to say, here you go, use these because we're giving you pass-through rights and get more cardholders onto your platform. and get your existing card holders to use the cards more. So that's sport, and cricket is, I won't use the word religion, I'm sure it's been used already in this room, but again, scale and intensity of engagement, but also great economics, right? So for a brand like us, it's crucial to drive domestic relevance in this country, as it is in many other countries, everywhere pretty much in the world. And Mastercard Economics Institute recently released a report. It's a very short but interesting read that talks about the economic impact of the ICC World Cup this year, but also of the other tournaments that have happened. And cross-border tourism is huge for Mastercard or any payments company. And it really bolsters cross-border tourism, but also domestic spend. So all in all, great for consumer engagement, great for the business.
Thank you, Kaveri. Can you just talk a little bit more, particularly around kind of the cross-border, and perhaps just give an illustrative example as to how kind of cross-border works, and then I guess the impact of the experiences that you create here on the ground through the Cricket World Cup?
Absolutely. I mean, before cricket, I can give an example of what we do when we talk about global tournaments and global sponsorships in sport. We promote them not only in the locations, the destinations where the event is happening, but also across other markets and other countries. So if it's Australia Open, which happens at the beginning of the year, we will say, hey, we're going to curate Priceless experience packages. So everything we do is underpinned by Priceless, which is what money can't buy. We just celebrated 25 years of our brand philosophy. It's not an ad campaign, it's so much more than that. And we will take, again, cardholders, end users of merchants to Australia. And to give an example of an experience, just to bring it to life, we will get them to play on the Rod Laver Arena, on the day of the final match. Of course, it's very early morning, so it's for the brave-hearted to get up at 5 and go and toss some balls with the brand ambassadors. Jim Courier, Naomi Osaka, who was a brand ambassador until a couple of years ago, so on and so forth. In cricket, similarly, we've done that, with our partners, the ICC, and we promoted this in markets such as the UAE, in North America, in Australia, cricket-loving countries, primarily Australia and UAE, and of course within India. And people have come in and experienced cricket like never before. So walking onto the field and standing just behind the boundary, watching the players play, rather practice before the match, the cardholders' children walking onto the field with holding the flag for the flag bearer experience. There are so many, I can go on and on. But all of this has really fostered, again, acquisition and usage that I spoke about, and also really driving a cashless economy, which is fundamental to what we do. That is what drives digital acceptance when you say, use a Mastercard on Swiggy when you order your cappuccino, and you stand a chance to win one of these experiences.
Thank you. So we've heard a little bit on kind of the strategic driver of DP World and kind of connecting with the grassroots from a Mastercard perspective in terms of how you can kind of engage consumers and sort of drive the brand affinity through sort of the partnership. Arnab, the Coca-Cola company has a vast portfolio of product. When it comes to something like the Cricket World Cup, how do you decide what brands you're going to kind of focus the sponsorship on, and then how do you kind of strategically drive that sort of through the business?
Yeah, thanks for the question, good one. And first of all, very happy to be here. An outstanding event, I think, overall. So I think everything starts with what the business objective is. If you kind of go back, I would say 15, 20 years, I think everything was probably being done by brand Coke. Everything. And honestly, every brand has also got limited budgets, limited scope. And I think around 3 years ago, we had to actually have a very internal, it was a hard call we had to take as to how will you have a very clear portfolio strategy. And actually, the answer is very intuitive and it's very simple. I think for people, I think, who are probably 40 plus, 45 plus, we had this brand called Thumbs Up, many years ago. If you go back to the archives, it's got a lot of history around how this brand has activated cricket. I think you can see campaigns with Imran Khan, Sunny Gavaskar, and it's all there in the archives. And if you look into the clear business numbers, it's the largest brand that we have. It also happens to be the largest FMCG brand in India in terms of retail sales value. So largest brand, largest passion point, it made absolutely no sense for us to go with any other brand. So I think it was a very, I would say, simple call. And obviously there was a lot of, I would say, consumer work which was done as to from a positioning, targeting, how this would work very well for us. So we went with a very clear role that for the next at least 5 to 10 years, if it's got to be from a fan perspective, it's going to be led by Thumbs Up. It does not mean that brand Coke will not have any role, and I'm talking about India out here. But if there are opportunities where the brand Coke objectives will fit, obviously it will also come in. In countries outside of India, at least in our operating unit, where there is no Thumbs Up, obviously the whole activation is being led by brand Coke. Along with that, obviously it's a huge platform, huge event. If there are opportunities for other brands, so for example, we just kind of made a new extension on a brand we have called Limca. We've extended that into something what we're calling Limca Sport, and it made absolute sense for us to use this platform to launch this across India. So those are the two brands where, at least in India, we've been trying to, I would say, focus on, and I see that's the way it's going to go ahead. Also in terms of ROI, because a lot of investment is going in. It's not just the sponsorship cost for us, but the sponsorship cost is actually a small fraction of what we spend in terms of the overall activation cost. And if the brand is not having scale, the impact on the activation on the ground is not going to be there. So that was the reason why we said that let's go with Thumbs Up in terms of the lead brand for us.
Okay, great. And I guess in a similar vein to Mastercard, where we talk to issuers and merchants, customers are absolutely vital for the Coca-Cola business. How have you been working with kind of customers to kind of generate the scale and engagement then through to kind of the consumers of the brand for Thumbs Up for this Cricket World Cup?
Yeah. So unlike the Western world, customers here are a mix of what we call traditional trade, which is very, very big, by the way. Still 85% of the Indian business landscape, at least for us, we are still working with the traditional trade, which is in the Western world, it's like the mom and pop shops. Yeah. And then we have got the modern trade customers. So I think both of them are extremely important for us. I think platforms like the ICC World Cup, again, give a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to do an integrated piece of work. So obviously it's an integrated one where we have incentives for our distributors, for the retailers, which is all obviously linked up with an engaging kind of activation plan with consumers. So I'll just give you a number. For this ICC World Cup, we have gone and activated around 400,000 retail outlets across India. And that's an important scale for us. Again, an important number. Close to 1 billion packs of Thumbs Up had a QR code which was linked to an engagement plan with the ICC World Cup. And that's the scale, again, I go back to as to what a brand like Thumbs Up brings in. And then when you look at modern trade, obviously we'll have to work with them, I would say individually to, I would say tailor-make individual plans for them. But this passion is so big, and the ICC World Cup is such a big platform. I think it's never a very hard sell if you are there on time and if you have a very strong idea.
Yeah, fantastic. Rathindra, I'm going to bring you into the conversation now. And you have kind of bridged kind of the previous World Cup here in India and today. What are the sort of changes that you've seen? And I know your background is much more kind of on the media sort of consumption side, but putting a lens from a consumer and fan perspective and how brands can kind of lean in, what are those changes that you've seen and sort of the positive impacts that are being made?
Right. Very good morning or afternoon, all of you. Thanks for inviting me here. So the more things change, the more they remain the same. I mean, old cliche, but from an event perspective, a World Cup, and like everyone's spoken already, is a spectacle. It's a massive event, and it attracts, therefore, brands, it attracts fan engagement, it attracts the best performers in the world to come and showcase their talent. That is not changed, even though formats have changed, even though brand response or brand strategy might have changed. I would highlight 3 differences I see between 2011, when incidentally I used to be on the broadcast side, working for Disney, and today, 12 years later in 2023. First, the big one is the shift from linear viewing to a non-linear or a hybrid viewing, which is very simple. In 2011, you had the first high-definition launch, which was the big thing on television. At that time, digital viewership was in its infancy, or almost, starting off at that stage. Today, the whole thing has changed. As Sanjog very aptly put, you heard the numbers, how the 40 million concurrency figures are now jostling for attention with a traditional, typical linear television viewership. So that's the big shift. The second big is from passive to active, which is in the 2011 World Cup, you would possibly have watched a cricket match on television, but at that time you didn't have that small screen in your hand, you didn't have your small user groups, whether it's any form of social media where you would do. That has changed massively today. Viewing a product or viewing a spectacle is not just seeing something, but it's also interacting with it. And as we all know, and as we all discussed today, something which brands are very excited about, that has made a significant difference to every element of the product. And the third is the very big change I see is language. India being a country of so many languages, so many cultures, it's almost like a mini Europe, as I like to say, with different geographical regions and entities. The cricket analysis or cricket commentary, which used to happen predominantly in English in 2011 and before, changed rapidly after that. And today you have different languages, you have more and more analysts coming in, and you also have, as a result, newer fans coming in today to engage with a property like this in the way they feel comfortable and in the language they understand and they enjoy. So if I now bring all this together, the brands today are not, I would say, I wouldn't say that they didn't do things before and now they're doing a lot of things. But remember, cricket could be also a lazy buy and a lazy sell, because cricket adjacency leads to very passionate eyeballs, which everybody has, but then you have to break through the clutter. So to provide value, a brand, a broadcaster, and a federation or a rights holder all have to hit a sweet spot. And keeping all this in mind, I think every brand today, as you see, the numbers, if you look at it, probably are more or less the same and maybe slightly more, but there's not that seismic a difference in the number of partners, etc. But where things have changed is how brands are looking, and just like Kaveri, Arnab, and Ashwani just shared, each brand has its own specific nuance where they are trying to address their target audience. They're trying to attach themselves with their brand objective, which is the most important, the first step, as Arnab pointed out, and then play it out over a period of time. In certain cases, big global brands I see today are now looking to India more as a massive marketplace, probably much more than 2011, when there would be India-focused brands or brands participating in India. Today, with the growth of cricket, the value of cricket today and what we read, what IPL has done to the system, I think a lot of brands today, a lot of global brands are now parking away money and resources for such spectacles and building it up.
Fantastic.
Just add one.
Great.
I think very interesting about the languages, and I think the unlock that the languages have done also, another big change that I see, and we were discussing it outside. 2011 and probably the earlier part of 2000s, cricket was still the bulk of the viewership and the engagement, at least from our side we saw, was coming from the metros and maybe the tier 1 kind of cities. This World Cup, and as I said, we are also able to get a lot of data. Who's participating in our activation programs? You have all these scans, so we know where it's working. It's all happening in small town India today. And I think that's a great kind of symptom as to why this game is about to explode even more. Because it started off as a very English-speaking, urban kind of phenomenon in the 70s and 80s. And I think the whole transition for it to be the mass sport, I think the journey is still on. And if people think that the game has got saturated and the ICC World Cup has got saturated, I think we are far from it. There's a massive unlock, still to be done with what he said.
And that's perfect in terms of talking a little bit more to sort of the grassroots and beyond boundaries, and how you are using that platform to not just reach and connect with the communities here in India, but obviously kind of globally. And would love to hear a little bit more about the initiative and how you're kind of making it work, and sort of the role Sachin Tendulkar is also playing for you.
Yeah, so Joanne, being a logistics company with a global presence of both cricket and our logistics network, which I alluded to earlier, the Beyond Boundaries initiative stems from making sports, and in particular cricket, available to all talent, grassroots, to a larger audience around the world. As a logistics company, we can be supplying oil for cricket bats or cork for balls, yeah? And it all just comes together as a shared vision and value. How are we making it possible? Just what you asked me now. We have engaged 50 shipping containers, which have been curated to have sun protection, scoreboards, and changing rooms. And we are placing this in various parts of the world, including providing kits for young talent and players at the grassroots. Each of these kits have pads, gloves, helmets, bats, obviously. And you would have seen yourself during the events on the media enabled with our friends here and yourselves, that for every 100 runs scored in this World Cup by any team, a big screen comes up where we announce that DP World is giving away 10 of these kits. And we've already pledged more than over 2,000 kits just so far. And obviously, the runs keep coming and it will keep flowing more and more. So the intention is completely to get down to the grassroots cricket, get beyond boundaries globally. We have already delivered 2 containers, one in Bombay and one in Ahmedabad, which is actually in a girls' college. And the third one is being delivered in Chennai just at the end of this week.
Fantastic. Can I ask, and how do you determine where the containers go? Is there a consumer engagement? Is it driven through a panel that is choosing where to go? Do you have priorities based on your business?
So, sorry, can you rephrase the question?
So you've obviously pledging to deliver these containers. Yeah. What is the process by which those containers go to certain cities or markets? Is it driven by a business rationale? Is it consumer engagement? Is there a panel that is deciding?
There's actually a complete process, but we follow cricket, Joanne. We follow cricket wherever cricket reaches out. So cricket, whether South Africa, whether it's West Indies, America's next year, as a panelist just before we're talking about. So it's unlimited for us. We're not particularly choosing a particular market. We're just going along with cricket and its vision, and with our logistics, we enable the containers to travel by ship, obviously, or by road, and then we reach out to the largest point to make it available. But then we also have certain initiatives like we have chosen a brand ambassador, and then we work with them into seeing where people need the talent most.
Okay. Fantastic. We talked to kind of the bridge of how technology and viewership has shifted since you were covering kind of the last World Cup. Arnab, you have used kind of technology quite extensively in kind of sort of your current sort of campaigns. It would be great to kind of understand the role that technology has played and how consumers can then kind of benefit from different forms of engagement with the brand.
Yeah. I think technology is going to play one of the most important roles as we start thinking about new ways to engage our fans. Okay, and I think you spoke about it. It's going to be a huge amount of clutter, as he said. It's an easy buy and easy sell. There are going to be a lot of brands who are going to be, come in, and therefore, what the formula for success was 10, 15 years ago. It was very simple. You make a nice TV campaign, strong TV campaign, good insights, put it on air, and your objectives are actually met. And that's not enough right now, because we are clearly seeing that if you have to get the engagement and the attention of the fans, you have to do a lot more. I don't think we are there yet, but we are experimenting a lot. And 2 examples. The T20 World Cup, we worked with the ICC and with the broadcaster at the time, and we said that, can we use the stump cam footage and allow a fan to actually scan a bottle of Thumbs Up and then view the match from the stump? You know, nobody had done that before. And the experience was outstanding. And we had close to 3.5, 4 million people who actually were logging in through their pack of Thumbs Up and watching the game and the highlights. We'd actually made a special highlights reel to actually watch how does the game kind of look. Imagine Virat Kohli hitting that big 6 at MCG from the stump cam, and outstanding experience. What was helping us is that you also were able to collect a lot of data, because with technology is also what's the data you get, and then how you can use that data once again, because you can understand what are the passion points exactly, what do consumers exactly want in a match, and how you can go back to them. So that was one interesting example. In this World Cup, again, everybody's talking about AI. I heard about Unmesh speaking about generative AI. So we are running this campaign, interestingly. It's called Believe a Bot. So we've got Shah Rukh Khan, and we have worked with a partner who has gone and essentially put in that engine last close to 40 years of data. Okay, what has happened when India is playing a particular game? So assume India is not playing well in the semi-final, and on Twitter or on threads, but primarily on Twitter, there's a comment that I think it's going to be difficult for India. The bot essentially comes and speaks about how, 20 years ago, we were exactly in the same situation, and actually India actually won from here. And if you can actually go back and see what happened in the India-England game when we lost a lot of wickets, and then the bot actually said, don't worry, we have got Rohit Sharma, who's got an outstanding World Cup record. And we were lucky that actually he scored, good amount of runs that day. But apart from the fun factor, I think what our team is able to learn is the power of what AI can do. I think this year was a very small experiment, but I think it's opening up our eyes as to what the future of consumer engagement can be. And as we are starting to plan for the next year's World Cup, and obviously there's a World Cup every year almost, I think that's the experiments which we want to, I would say, continue, but that's going to be the future. You won't have engagement until you really instill technology into this engagement plans.
In fact, to add on to that, I think going forward, one major difference which already one sees is that to break through the clutter, any and every brand, and I would like, Kaveri to step in and say whether I'm on the right track, but a very strong consumer engagement campaign using clutter-breaking digital social media promotion. Today, there's one new area which has come in, which is the influencer, the social digital media influencer marketing background. A lot of people and a lot of fans are looking to such influencers and what they say or what they talk about. Now, the response might vary in the sense, are they getting too commercially minded, or are they still staying neutral to their own ethos? Those things are debatable, and I think that ecosystem is developing. But brands today, like he said, can't just depend on a 30-second promo spot and some POPs, which used to be activation at one stage. Put up POPs on shop and then, put a 30-second spot, spend money. Today, brands have to look at breakthrough social media campaigns. And again, not just one way, it has to be multi-way. A beautiful example I remember was Specsavers in England took a decision, like you said about the stump cam. They took a decision to sponsor the umpires. And there was a match where the England spinner, Jack Leach, was constantly taking off his glasses and rubbing them. And Ben Stokes sent out a tweet on X, which we call now, saying, hey, Specsavers, why don't you take care of his glasses because he seems to be losing all the time. That went viral. And this wasn't done by Specsavers. This was something which came out, almost, inorganically from a situation. Now, for a brand custodian, this is the dream they want to look at. This is the clutter breaker. When you have 20 sponsors in a tournament, each of them are activating, each of them have a digital social media, campaign in addition to their above-the-line strategy. If they get one or two such inflection points, whether around an upset or around a funny event or around a quirkiness which is happening, that has more value and more recall than anything else. But having said that, you can't generate it like that because these have to happen on the, where I think AI has a magnificent role to play because AI can move in and identify these moments real time much better than a physical human being, who's trying to monitor a match and get back. So, that's for me a little bit of crystal ball gazing, but that I think is going to be more and more this refinement, this constant refinement of where we want to go.
Yeah, I mean, it is so important to have an authentic role as a brand to ensure that you can have the right communication and engagement with your fans and be able to kind of grow your fan base. Kaveri, I'm going to lead that into, as a business, whilst the Cricket World Cup has gone on, there has been a huge event that I'm sure everyone in the room is also aware of, the Rugby World Cup that took place and has recently sort of finished in France, of which you are a sort of significant sort of partner. How do you manage from a business perspective, managing two global sponsorships running kind of concurrently, but what are the kind of the learnings and of synergies as well, sort of between the two events that you can kind of lean and sort of breathe off of each other?
Yeah, thanks. Before I answer that, spot on about everything that the panel has said so far. And I think it just makes me think that we sponsors should really get together before the next thing comes up and really talk about the synergies, among our brands. But talking about Rugby World Cup that concluded a couple of weeks ago in Paris, and of course the ongoing Cricket World Cup, how we've managed, lots of sleepless nights, but it's been utter joy. I think rugby has really been, and for me, this was the first time in this role that I went for a Rugby World Cup, and the conversations, as a Gen Z would say, were totally lit. Rugby is really has already become a very significant force for good. And I'm talking about the learnings that I think every sport can take away. I got some data points here, so I would not forget. But I encourage everyone to read the Future of Rugby report, which actually was a collaboration between Mastercard and the University of Bath. Now, there are 5 areas where World Rugby have decided to double down and really, really drive massive positive social change. And those areas are as follows. So there is inclusivity, and I'll give you some data points. By 2027, the top 10 ranked rugby nations in the world are going to be holding competitions and festivals that will be focused on participation by people with disabilities. Female participation in rugby is at an all-time high. And I really, really hope we're going to have a conversation about women in sport and women's sport. 2.7 million players added on, female players added on. It's a 28% increase in female participation since 2017. There are very active efforts that are being made by World Rugby and all the rugby nations emerging and emerged to talk about mental health and to destigmatize mental health, particularly among men. There are about 40 countries that are playing wheelchair rugby now. There is education that's happening at grassroots level. Also, World Rugby is the first international federation to have signed up the UN Sport for Climate Change framework. Again, the list goes really long. And I think the idea is not to say that we go ahead and boil the ocean by doing every single thing that I've just mentioned, but we have to start somewhere. There has to be more conversation about equity and equality in sport. And I know that's what's happening. I know that the ICC team have been talking to us as well about women's cricket. We've got to double down on that opportunity. It's a big one. But the point I also want to make is, it's not enough to just have women's sports, sportswomen out there playing on the field. It's also about having women in positions of influence, coaches and managers and executives on boards and in organizations. It's only then that change is going to begin. So I think that's what, not just cricket, but other sports as well, could potentially take a leaf from rugby. And I know that, efforts are well underway. I just think it's time to accelerate. I think young girls need to see women, as I said, across the board, not just playing cricket, but also being in positions of influence and making decisions that are going to address the inequities that we see today, particularly considering cricket is just such a male-dominated sport. I think the effort that it will take on our part is going to be larger. And this is not just for rights holders. This is the same question we're asking ourselves too, about what we are doing to make a change, and to change systemically, not a flash-in-the-pan kind of a change.
So talking to kind of the future and kind of brand roles, and obviously every organization and rights holder is looking at what others are doing and what they can kind of learn from. What are some of the things that you're seeing in the wider industry that you think are being impactful that we could consider in the world of kind of cricket as well?
Sure. I mean, so like what Kaveri said, the current generation, and without sounding a bit ageist here, but the youngsters of today, who I'm sure every brand would want to target when they want to associate with sports, because a big chunk of the sports viewership is coming from the young generation, the Gen Zs, the millennials, etc., etc. Diversity, equality, and inclusiveness is becoming a big part of their lives. Much bigger than probably many of us think. Many of us probably don't even realize that till it actually hits us through our children, through their friends, through relatives, etc., etc. Brands already have made that shift, and this goes beyond the corporate social initiatives, the CSR stuff which we normally do in India, which is almost like a regulatory must. And going forward, I think you will see brands looking more and more, working in tandem with rights holders and with broadcasters to bring in elements to address all of this. It's great saying we have had a fantastic cricket World Cup, but does a cricket World Cup in your home nation, in addition to boosting the economy, also, for example, boost women's cricket, for that matter? Get more and more people to come in and enjoy and watch and follow and build superstars amongst our women cricketers. Those are the sort of, I think, elements which you'll see brands, and especially big, evolved, and global brands coming in and doing more and more, and they will lead the way, I'm sure, for all Indian brands as well who want to participate in this to try and do. And all this also gives you, like I said, viral opportunities to do stuff which will, I'm not saying take away the focus from the game and a great moment in the game, but to bring in these sorts of elements which today's kids and children, they actually understand and they sort of resonate with.
Yeah, those enhancements are super important, and there is a women's sports session sort of later on this morning. Coming back to kind of beyond boundaries, I mean, how important is it, you talk to kind of grassroots, but also that broader diversity and inclusion and impact within your own workforce and the diversity that can have as well?
Yeah, it's interesting, and as you just mentioned about, not just men, it's not about girls and women and reaching out to the children. So, DP World is not an FMCG brand or like Coca-Cola and where people have an association. We are logistics, a service industry. So for us, it's just the shared values of cricket about reaching out to people. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the containers we delivered earlier this month was at the Girls' College in Ahmedabad, actually giving kits away to girls to promote girls' cricket. And, while we're not there yet, but there is evidently a very big interest by women and girls' cricket all over the world, and it's gaining a lot of prominence, and why cricket, even other sports. So I'm completely convinced that we'll continue to support the talent which is completely gender diversified, and there'll be more and more people wanting to go that way.
Fantastic. Arnab, as we look to kind of sort of wrap up this session, from a Coca-Cola perspective, what does the future of cricket hold for the brand, the portfolio? Where do you see your investment going and evolving in the years to come?
This is India or the global perspective?
From both.
Global perspective. So in India, I think it's kind of very clear, as I said, we feel that this is going to continue to be one of the biggest passion points out here. It's a massive platform to kind of reach and engage with consumers because both are important for us. So we are committed to investments, and I think our partnership with ICC, with our broadcasters, it's not a tactical play. It's going to continue to be a strategic investment for us. I want to speak about opportunity of what we see in women's cricket, because in the next 5 to 6 years, that's a big area where we see that part of the game is going to explode. And we're already seeing signs of that. I frankly believe that women's cricket is going to become a bigger global sport faster than men's sport. And the symptoms are already there. You've got countries like Thailand who are doing extremely well in women's cricket. Countries like Brazil is doing very well. And if we have the numbers, I think it helps for our company to have a much bigger global story. But overall, in India, we continue to invest. It's going to be very big. At a global level, I think to be very honest, I think it's been a little bit of a challenge because it's been seen as a very subcontinental sport. It's good and bad, but when you see the FIFA World Cup and all of a sudden you have the ICC World Cup, the perception is that, okay, this is a subcontinental sport. You guys go and manage this. It's big for you, and then you go and manage it. And there's an interesting piece because one of the things our markets are realizing that the Indian diaspora and the South Asian diaspora is very big. And one of the big attractions, you spoke about the World Cup in the US, the India-Pakistan match happening in New York is attractive because you've got a massive diaspora there. All of us, when I speak to my counterpart in the US or even in the UK, yes, I think it's becoming very important because the Indian diaspora is very big out there, right? And it's having an impact. But I think it's important, what we expect with, the good success of this World Cup, plus I think hopefully the next T20 World Cup, I do expect cricket to see a big revival in its core markets, Australia, England, and all other markets. I think with the numbers improving, and India being a very important market, obviously, from a global perspective, it'll continue to be a big bet for us as a company. And just one small thing, cricket is now going to be a part of the Olympic Games.
Yes.
And we are the oldest partner of the IOC.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, that's also started to change the mindset a little bit, at least in our company in Atlanta out here.
Yeah, I was just about to ask that would the Olympics change that perception of 100%. Cricket being a subcontinental sport alone? Yeah.
But I can tell you that next year's World Cup in the US is attracting a massive interest all of a sudden. It has kind of never attracted this much interest. And you look into the reasons why, and Indians are playing a big role also, just because of the sheer population and the interest. And yeah.
Sorry, can I just add a comment? Talking about diversity and the reach, and even beyond subcontinent, we chose Sachin Tendulkar, the great cricketing icon, as our brand ambassador. And his values are so immense about growing Indian girls cricket and promoting it, that we just thought as a value that he's a person who can take us beyond boundaries. So when you talk about going beyond boundaries and going beyond subcontinent and the global reach, this is where people like, whether Shah Rukh or Sachin Tendulkar as a brand ambassador really help us get the message of diversity through. And that's why we featured him even in our media campaigns. Yeah.
Kaveri, just for you to sort of sum up from a Mastercard perspective, well, what does the future of cricket like, both at a men's and also kind of women's level?
Yeah. So one of the things about our sponsorships portfolio is that our partnerships are really long-standing partnerships. Joe, you know this. I think UEFA Champions League this year was 19th year of us sponsoring UEFA, and it's running into decades and decades. So definitely for cricket, we're very much here to stay. We're very much here to continue investing. This was year 2 of our investment in the sport, and really delighted to have done that. As I mentioned, a big brand commercial opportunity for us. So we will continue to do that. I really hope the conversation on women's cricket accelerates. Thank you for making that point. I think it's also important to say, very often we talk about women's sport as a DE&I effort. I think it's high time we start to recognize and look at the data points that you have. There are plenty. It's high time we recognize that women's sport is good economics, it's good business too. So certainly looking forward to having a conversation on that. But we're not taking away this investment from cricket anytime soon, just as much as we're not taking away the investment in India, hopefully anytime soon. And again, the calendar is looking really rich and very exciting, so why not? I think it's important, however, for us as we move forward to look at 2 things. One is even more holistic. Someone made the point about activation and how important it is for the activation to be really scale. So we would love to do more. We would love to plan well in advance. We'd love to partner other sponsors. And the other is also, not just taking from the game, but also moving the game forward and giving back to the game as much as we can. So looking forward to all of that.
Great, thank you. I can see Jasper twitching at the side of stage. So in summary, I would say from a brand perspective, the future of investment in cricket is significantly bright and prosperous, and finding kind of those genuine connectivity points for organic reach, connection, using technology to kind of further enhance those experiences will only evolve kind of cricket moving forward for both the men's and the women's game. Thank you, everyone.